Welcome back to Conflicts of Interest. This is episode 678, and today is September 27th, 2024. I'm the host of the show, Kyle Anzalone. All right, so on today's show, we got the typical news to go over. I also have a couple of my newsletters that I've been emailing out at the Libertarian Institute every day. So if you would like to sign up for the Libertarian Institute debrief, you could do that at libertarianinstitute.org, which is, of course, where this show is hosted, and I'm the news editor. So all these news stories that I talk about that I write up on the show, I publish at the Libertarian Institute. Additionally, you can find the show on the blog at antiwar.com, YouTube, Rumble, or Odysee for the video version of the show. It's up anywhere you can listen to audio podcasts. And of course, follow me on Twitter at @KyleAnzalone_. You can also support the show by supporting our sponsor, and that is the Expat Money Summit 2024, and that is the world's largest offshore event taking place entirely online from October 7th through the 11th. So you just have a couple weeks left to get your tickets, and you could get a free ticket by going to expatmoneysummit.com. Again, that's expatmoneysummit.com, or by following through from the link in the show notes page. Helps, they'll know you came from the Conflicts of Interest show. You came because I sent you if you go through that link in the show notes page. So that's helpful when you do that. There's a great lineup of speakers at the event. It's Scott Horton, Tom Woods, Ron Paul, Doug Casey, Tom Logano. So really just an awesome lineup of speakers. I am lucky enough to be on one of the panels for the event. Very excited to be talking with my pals Dave DeCamp and Hervoya Morik about the potential for World War III and what that would mean. So if you want, again, a complimentary ticket to the event, follow the link in the show notes page. Additionally, in the show notes page, there's a promo code, which is Kyle, Kyle, and that will save you $100 off a VIP ticket if you would like to attend the event that way. Either way, attending does help out the show, and so I really appreciate all of you who have already gotten your tickets to the event. All right, with that, let's get into today's show. First story up here, I wrote for the Libertarian Institute on September 26th. Kenya to bolster U.S.-backed police force in Haiti. So after months of failing to make progress against paramilitaries in Port-au-Prince, Nairobi plans to surge thousands of armed Kenyans into Haiti over the next 4 months. Kenya is planning to deploy 2,500 soldiers, officially dubbed police, to Haiti in a U.S.-backed operation. During his speech to the United Nations General Assembly on Thursday, Kenyan President William Ruto laid out his plan to surge troops into Haiti. He explained that 600 armed Kenyan police will arrive in Haiti within the coming weeks, bringing the total to 1,000, and by January of 2025, Ruto expects the number to reach 2,500. He said, "Our next batch, an additional 600, is undergoing redeployment training. We will be mission ready in a few weeks' time and look forward to the requisite support to enable their deployment. I must emphasize that Kenya will deploy the additional contingent towards attaining the target of all 2,500 police officers by January next year." Ruto said a lack of funding, training, and equipment is slowing the deployment of more troops to Haiti. The U.S. is the main backer of the operation and initially pushed for an international force deployment to Port-au-Prince. Washington hoped to restore the U.S.-backed government's rule in Haiti. This occurred in 2001 after a large number of Haitian migrants arrived to the U.S., and that, of course, was after the assassination of the Haitian president Jovenel Moïse. The U.S.-backed then Ariel Henry in his ascension to power in Port-au-Prince. Henry remained the prime minister, at least in name, as Port-au-Prince slowly slipped into the hands of gangs and other paramilitary forces in Haiti, which now control 80% of the capital city of the Caribbean nation. And their control is so significant that when Henry earlier this year traveled to Kenya to sign an agreement to have the Kenyan police actually officially deploy to Haiti, he was unable to return because gangs had taken control of the airports and ports. And so after that, the U.S. backed a new government. And so they have a coalition government that the U.S. is backing in Haiti. But still, much like Ariel Henry, they lack legitimacy and any real control over the capital city. So Washington struggled for years to find a country that was willing to send its soldiers to Haiti. Kenya agreed after the U.S. offered to fund, train, and equip the Kenyan soldiers. Washington also signed a new defense cooperation agreement with Nairobi and made Kenya a major non-NATO ally, a status that gives Kenya access to advanced U.S. training and weapons. Nairobi began sending its soldiers to Port-au-Prince earlier this year. So far, these forces have failed to restore power to the Haitian government. The struggles of the Kenyan force has caused Port-au-Prince, Nairobi, and Washington to support changing the status of the mission from a policing operation to an official UN peacekeeping mission. While the Kenyan forces could receive a boost in UN support if named official peacekeepers, it could also cause more tensions with the Haitians. UN peacekeepers have a dark legacy in Haiti, including committing mass sexual abuse against Haitian women and causing a cholera outbreak that killed 10,000 people. So, not sure what's going to happen moving forward in Haiti, but it doesn't seem like the situation is going to get better for the Haitians that live there, at least not until the U.S. and now Kenya extricate themselves from the situation. All right, next up here, Trump criticizes Zelensky for not reaching a deal with Russia to end the war. So on Wednesday, former President Donald Trump criticized Ukrainian President Zelensky for not reaching a deal with Russia to end the war, saying that whatever agreement was possible would not be worse than the current situation for Ukraine. So Trump said at a rally in North Carolina, "Those cities are gone. They're gone. And we continue to give billions of dollars to a man who refused to make a deal, Zelensky. There was no deal that he could have made that wouldn't have been better than the situation you have right now. You have a country that's been obliterated, not possible to be rebuilt. It'll take hundreds of years to rebuild it. There's not enough money to rebuild it if the whole world got together. If they made a bad deal, it would have been much better," Trump explained. So this is an interesting remark from Trump. If you'll remember on the last show, I blasted Trump quite a bit for eating the Biden administration's rhetoric when it came to his assassination attempts and claiming that Iran was behind them. But this is actually a fairly astute observation from the former president. And it does give a little bit of hope that if he does return to the Oval Office, well, things probably won't get better in the Middle East, but maybe there is a chance to de-escalate the war in Ukraine. Now, Trump has more or less bat the war in Ukraine since it happened, in the past, especially with the last massive military package to Ukraine, that $60 billion package. Trump's support for that was absolutely crucial to that getting passed. It wasn't going to pass, and then Trump backed it because we made it a loan that could be forgiven by the signature of a president rather than being a just straight grant. So Trump also said that Zelensky was making aspirations towards him, an apparent reference to comments the Ukrainian leader made in a recent New Yorker interview about Trump's desire to end the war. Zelensky said, "My feelings is that Trump doesn't really know how to stop a war, even if he thinks he knows how. With this war, oftentimes, the deeper you look at it, the less you'll understand it. I've seen many leaders who were convinced they knew how to end it tomorrow. As they waded in deeper to it, they realized it's not that simple." And so, while I do think the war could actually be ended quite easily, and that the U.S. actually does have a lot to bargain with in order to get the Ukrainians maybe some of their territory back and for the Russians to end their aggression in Ukraine, I do agree with Zelensky that I'm not sure Trump is actually capable of executing what he says he wants to do. And so, that is a problem in all of this. In the same interview, Zelensky said Senator J.D. Vance, Trump's running mate, was, quote, too radical. In a June interview with the New York Times, Vance said he would favor a deal that freezes the battle line and guarantees Ukrainian independence and includes some sort of long-term U.S. military assistance for Ukraine. Zelensky is at odds with other Republicans, including House Speaker Mike Johnson, who is upset with Zelensky for visiting an ammunition factory in Pennsylvania without inviting any Republicans. Johnson wrote a letter to Zelensky demanding that he fire the Ukrainian ambassador to the U.S. Johnson said in his letter, "I demand that you immediately fire Ukraine's ambassador to the U.S. The facility was in a politically contested battleground state, was led by a top political surrogate for Kamala Harris, and failed to include a single Republican because, on purpose, no Republicans were invited. The tour was clearly a partisan campaign event designed to help Democrats and is clearly election interference. And again, these are not people that I agree with, Zelensky, Trump, and Mike Johnson very often, but I do think his criticism in this letter is correct, and that was just a thinly veiled campaign event that Zelensky attended at that ammunition factory in Pennsylvania. Next up here, Biden announces nearly $8 billion in military aid for Ukraine. So President Joe Biden on Thursday announced a massive military aid package for Ukraine worth $8 billion ahead of his meeting with Zelensky at the White House. He said, "Today I am announcing a surge in assistance for Ukraine and a series of additional actions to help Ukraine win this war." He is authorizing the use of $5.5 billion in the Presidential Drawdown Authority, which allows the president to send weapons straight from U.S. military stockpiles to other countries. If the PDA funds hadn't been used, they would have expired on September 30th at the end of the 2024 fiscal year. Biden says he wanted to, quote, ensure this authority does not expire so that that my administration can fully utilize the funding appropriated by Congress to support the drawdown of U.S. equipment for Ukraine and then to replenish U.S. stockpiles. Biden also announced $2.4 billion in military aid using the Ukraine Security Assistance Initiative, which allows the Pentagon to purchase weapons for Ukraine. The Pentagon said in a press release that USAI package will include air defenses, air-to-ground munitions, drones, counter-drone systems, and other equipment. A day earlier, the Pentagon announced a separate PDA package worth $375 million, making the total military aid pledged to Ukraine this week $8.275 billion. Biden said that Ukraine would be receiving joint standoff weapons, glide bombs with a range of about 70 miles that can be fired from Ukraine's small fleet of F-16s. U.S. officials have said the joint standoff weapons will be packed with cluster bombs, which are banned by over 100 countries due to their indiscriminate nature and history of killing and maiming civilians even long after conflicts end. Biden said Ukraine will also receive more Patriot missile systems and that the U.S. would expand the training of Ukrainian soldiers on F-16 fighter jets. He explained, "Through these actions, my message is clear. The United States will provide Ukraine with the support it needs to win this war." Zelensky is set to present Biden with his so-called victory plan, but U.S. officials told the Wall Street Journal that the administration doesn't think he has a clear strategy. And according to media reports, the plan is essentially a framework for more military aid. Zelensky is also pushing hard for the U.S. to support long-range strikes with NATO weapons inside Russian territory. Moscow has warned that the step would mean NATO is at war with Russia, and President Putin has ordered changes to the Russian nuclear doctrine in a warning to the West in response. All right, next up, this is one of my Libertarian Institute debriefs, which of course you can get in your inbox every day by signing up for it at libertarianinstitute.org. This one is titled, "Do You Want a Beeper?" I write, "Many of us have asked ourselves over the past year, is there any line Israel could cross that would invoke a condemnation from the Biden administration? The answer is apparently no. Over the past week, Israel has conducted multiple terrorist attacks inside Lebanon. First, Israel detonated pagers that were distributed by Hezbollah. Many of the pagers or beepers were held by civil servants. Many of the devices exploded in public places, injuring and killing civilians. The next day, Israel detonated explosives in larger handheld devices. The attacks killed dozens of people, including women and children. Of course, the White House refused to condemn Israel for the attack. The Biden administration showed its support for the terrorist operations by sending more troops to the Middle East. The deployment, along with endangering the lives of the U.S. soldiers, is a message to Hezbollah. Respond to Israel terrorism and we will attack Lebanon. However, the award for crudest response in the government goes to the U.S. State Department envoy to combat anti-Semitism, and that's Deborah Lipstadt. During an event at the Israel American Consul, Lipstadt was asked about perception that Israel is weaker, to which she replied, "Do you want a beeper?" The endorsement of terrorism should be shocking and disturbing, but is what we have come to expect from the Biden administration. This week, Israel began a bombing campaign against mostly civilian targets in Lebanon. Over 600 were killed during the first 3 days of the bombardment, and the Lebanese government reports most of the dead are innocent civilians. And again, the White House bats Tel Aviv by sending more troops to the Middle East. Then the Biden administration authorized nearly $9 billion in military aid for Israel. The message again is clear. No matter what Israel does, the U.S. will go to war on its behalf. So far, this blanket check for Tel Aviv has resulted in genocide in Gaza, ethnic cleansing in the West Bank, and now the region is on the brink of a massive war between Israel and Lebanon that is sure to draw in the U.S. and Iran. So anyways, that's a little sample of what you'll get if you'll sign up for that newsletter. Next up here, we're going to get into that $9 billion that the U.S. is giving Israel. This one from Dade to Camp, September 26th, antiwar.com. On Thursday, the Israeli Defense Ministry announced that it secured $8.7 billion in military aid from the U.S. to support its ongoing military efforts, meaning the genocidal slaughter in Gaza and Israel's dramatic escalation in Gaza. The ministry said in a statement that its Director General, Major General Iziel Zamar, concluded negotiations in Washington to secure the military aid. It said the package includes $3.5 billion for essential wartime procurement that has already been sent to Israel and $5.2 billion grant for air defenses. The ministry said the $5.2 billion for air defenses will significantly strengthen critical systems such as the Iron Dome and David Sling, while supporting the continued development of advancing high-powered laser defense systems currently in its latter stages of development. U.S. Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin vowed on Thursday that the U.S. would continue arming Israel and brushed off the idea of setting red lines. He said, "We've been committed from the very beginning to help Israel, provide the things that are necessary for them to be able to protect their sovereign territory, and that hasn't changed and won't change in the future." So far, the U.S. has not announced the details of the $8.7 billion weapons package, but the funds are likely being pulled from the $17 billion in new military aid that Israel was included in the $95 billion foreign military aid bill that Biden signed into law back in April. Israel has already also receives $3.8 billion from the U.S. in annual military aid. So, they have $20 billion to draw from in this year. So this isn't even half of it. All right, next up here, Israel rejects U.S. bad ceasefire proposal, continues to pound Lebanon. So Israel on Thursday rejected a U.S. and French proposal for a ceasefire in Lebanon and continued to launch heavy airstrikes in the country. Later that day, Lebanon's health ministry said Israeli strikes killed 92 people in the previous 24-hour period. The U.S. and France are calling for a 21-day ceasefire, but the U.S. continues to provide military aid to Israel and is vowing to defend Israel if the situation escalates. Given Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu no incentive to stop his new bombing campaign. Netanyahu's office released a statement denying reports that there's been progress on a ceasefire and vowed to continue hitting Lebanon hard and to keep the onslaught up in Gaza. The statement from the Prime Minister said, "The report about the ceasefire incorrect. This is an American-French proposal that the Prime Minister has not even responded to. The report about the purported directive to ease up on fighting in the north is the opposite of the truth. The Prime Minister has directed the IDF to continue fighting with full force according to the plan that was presented to him. The fighting in Gaza will also continue until all the objectives of the war have been achieved." So the Israeli Foreign Minister, which is Israel Katz, also rejected the idea of a ceasefire, saying, "There will not be a ceasefire in the north. We will continue to fight against terrorists organization Hezbollah with all of our might until victory and their safe return of the residents to the north to their homes. So Lebanon's health ministry said that overnight Israeli airstrikes in eastern Lebanon killed 20 people, almost all Syrian nationals. According to the AFP, the ministry said Israeli strikes on the village of Yuin killed 20 people, including 19 Syrian nationals. Israel has also been bombing Beirut again in a strike that in a residential area of the southern suburb of Dalia. Lebanon's health ministry said that 2 people were killed in the strike and 15 were wounded. About 700 people have been killed by Israeli strikes in Lebanon since Monday. The Monday bombing killed over 550 people, the majority being civilians, according to the Lebanese health minister. And so here you have what is supposed to be happening in Lebanon is that the U.S. is backing Israel and the Israeli policy is escalate to de-escalate. Now, I've talked about, I think on Monday or Tuesday show, how I thought this would be an appealing message to the White House because this is the U.S. policy when it comes to Russia, China, Iran, which is if war breaks out, we're going to escalate until the other side agrees to a ceasefire and de-escalate. Of course, this is a recipe to end up in nuclear warfare with Russia or China or a major war with Iran, but that is the U.S. policy, and that is apparently what Netanyahu has been pushing to U.S. officials. And so I think on Netanyahu's part, it's probably a smart thing to advocate because this is something that is going to resonate in the halls of the White House because it's already the way the U.S. approaches things. But when you have a policy of escalate to de-escalate, that means once the other side offers or starts to look at the de-escalation, that you actually have to buy into that, or else you're not engaging in a policy of escalate to de-escalate. You're just engaging in a policy of escalation to start a new war. And so, this kind of just reminds me of the point of the newsletter that I wrote on, I think, Tuesday, which is, what is the point of empire if vassal states don't listen? So I write, the U.S. finds itself in an odd place. Sure, we are the dominant military power, the dollar is the world's reserve currency, and Washington is the center of global politics. Still, the White House appears to be unable to control key vassal states, leading America into wars and poverty. Israel is a shining example of this phenomenon. Washington lavishes Tel Aviv with billions of dollars in weapons each year, and yet the White House asks Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to de-escalate, and he does the opposite. One would think that directly disobeying multiple requests from the Biden administration to de-escalate the war against Lebanon and reach a ceasefire deal with Hamas would result in some kind of response, but Netanyahu has done the opposite. For months, the Israeli leader has thwarted Biden's efforts to come to a ceasefire deal. This has become so obvious that even Senator Bernie Sanders noted it while speaking in the Capitol. Then, over the past week, Netanyahu has authorized multiple major attacks inside Lebanon, killing hundreds. Hezbollah said the Israeli attacks put the conflict into a new phase of war. This is the opposite of what Washington wants. A year ago, top official Jake Sullivan was bragging about the lack of conflict in the Middle East and that the administration was working towards a deal that would establish official ties between Tel Aviv and Riyadh. It's clear that this is the narrative that the Biden-Harris-Waltz campaign has attempted to present. However, Israel's actions since October 7th have blown up this narrative. In the past year, hundreds of rockets and drones have rained down on American bases in Iraq, Syria, and Jordan, leading to a handful of injuries and the deaths of 3 soldiers. That reality could have been possible if at any point over the past 11 months, the Biden administration would have conditioned military aid on Tel Aviv, accepting a ceasefire deal with Hamas and ending its tit-for-tat attacks with Hezbollah, but the White House refused to stand up to Israel while sending Tel Aviv billions of dollars in weapons. And then this is the last of the not news roundups, which I do a news roundup for the Libertarian Institute every day. I actually turn it into the news ticker for the show. So if anybody looks at that, that's where I get the news ticker from, is from my news roundup. But this last one I titled, "Is Biden Delusional or Selling America Netanyahu's Lies?" So President Biden made some baffling statements during his address to the UN General Assembly on Tuesday regarding the Middle East. The president claimed that in the region, he was working to bring greater measure of peace and stability. It's a bold statement from a man who has spent the past year funneling billions of dollars of arms to Israel for its attacks in Gaza, the West Bank, Lebanon, Syria, Yemen, and Iran. The assertion is consistent with what Biden seems to believe has happened during his time in the Oval Office. After all, on multiple occasions, he has declared that America is not at war and no U.S. troops were killed on his watch. Still, it seems almost unbelievable that Biden, or at least his speechwriters, would be willing to state that he is working for peace in the Middle East. In recent weeks, mainstream Israeli and American media reports have admitted that what the independent press has known all along, Biden is allowing Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to undermine a ceasefire in Gaza while blaming Hamas. These are not the actions of a man seeking peace. In fact, Biden has allowed Netanyahu to set an entire region on fire with U.S. weapons and intelligence support. Israel's onslaught in Gaza provoked the Houthis to attack international shipping in the Red Sea, the Shia militias of Iraq and Syria to conduct hundreds of attacks on U.S. soldiers occupying the Levant, and Tel Aviv has been locked into a tit-for-tat exchange of fire with Hezbollah. However, Netanyahu's belligerence has not stopped there. Tel Aviv has conducted multiple assassinations in the Lebanese and Iranian capitals. At the same time, numerous members of the Israeli government have discussed deliberate policy of ethnic cleansing of Palestinians from Gaza as well as the West Bank. Biden could have saved tens of thousands of innocent civilians in the Middle East by standing up to Netanyahu at any point over the past year, but his condition, which seems to be a combination of senility, cowardice, and hardcore Zionism, indefinitely prevents any sane policy changes. All right, everybody, that's where I'm going to wrap up the show today. Thank you all so much for tuning in and coming back to the show after my 2 weeks off. It's been a little bit of a crazy week here, but I think that the shows have been coming out all right. It's been pretty close to the same quality as before my little paternity leave there. But anyways, I appreciate you all so much for supporting the show, sharing it, supporting the sponsor of the program, and now all of you who sign up for the newsletter. Thanks, everyone.